All right, looks like we're slowly getting populated, so thanks for joining us, folks. My name is Kim Batchelder. I'm the Vegetation Management Coordinator for Sonoma County Ag and Open Space, and I am responsible for managing the Vegetation Management Grant Program that is now on its fourth year of grant cycle. So we're very excited about that. Hopefully, we'll get a good round of applications again this year. And the nature of these community workshops is really to share with you some of the ways that we want to encourage people to apply for this grant and some of the process that we will ask you to use in order to submit your application. With me tonight, I have Robert Aguero, the Senior Environmental Specialist for Permit Sonoma Natural Resources Department, and Ben Nicholls, the Fire Chief for Sonoma Lake and Napa Unit. So they will be able to share a little bit more specific things as we progress through the evening. We are scheduled to go for about an hour and a half. We'll make sure that there's plenty of time to ask questions, either via the Q&A at the box at the above, or you can simply sign in. We will try to answer your questions live. So without further ado, I'll keep moving on. Let me see, next slide goes. All right, so tonight we'll be focusing on a description of the grant process, a little bit of history of what we've been able to support so far, the Community Wildfire Prevention Plan and the Project Entry Portal. Robert Aguero will be addressing environmental compliance and what that means to your project. Then Ben Nicholls will provide us a little sense of the regional priorities, and together we will discuss some of the criteria for successful projects. And then finally, we'll have some questions and answers sessions. And so I do encourage you to drop any questions you might have into the Q&A, and we will try to answer those as they come, but we might accumulate a few during the session and be able to respond at the end. So with that, moving on to what the grant has been able to accomplish so far. Since 2021, when the grant program was established, we have entered into 65 vegetation management grant agreements worth about $11.4 million for different various fuel treatments across the county. This year, we have, for 2024, we have $1 million to be able to distribute to applicants that are successfully able to submit their information and offer a project that shows the most amount of positive return on that investment. So with that, I just want to kind of give you a sense of the distribution of the projects. As you can see, we spent about $3 million per year. The Board of Supervisors approved $1 million for this request for proposals process that we're running this workshop on. But you can see these projects were divided up between access and egress, community education, defensible space, shaded fuel breaks, that type of thing. So I will go into a little bit more detail as we progress through the workshop. I wanted to first kind of give you a sense of what the grant guidelines, where you can find those, and the application. I'll stop sharing my screen and show another screen. Let's see if we can do this relatively quickly. So in order to find our grant application, you would go to the Sonoma County Ag and Open Space site, where under our impacts and vegetation management grants, and you can see the grant program provides some information about what has been funded in previous years. The application and guidelines is really what I want you to focus on. And this is under the English or Spanish. You'll have the guidelines, which really provide good information about how the projects are being funded, what the desired outcomes are, some of the key, who is eligible for applying, and some of the key grant requirements as far as types of projects and criteria that we'll discuss in a little bit more detail. But all that information is available in the grant guideline page. Let's see if I can go back page and to the other source. And then going to the application, this is more detailed, but it is a fillable PDF, which means this is the form that you can fill out. You can complete sections starting with the project title and moving right through. Each one of these cells is fillable with your project title, your location, the supervisorial district that you're in. And just check real quick, Robert, are you seeing the application? Just to make sure, okay?
Yes.
So, thank you. And so you can complete that. You can checkbox any of these that are applicable, and then submit your application. You'll see down below the actual questions that we're asking you. And this is a good place to start. If you're really starting your application now, complete this part of the process, and then we'll get to how you enter your project into the project portal in just a moment. But each applicant does need to complete an application and submit it following the questions, the queries that we have in the application. And then down below, you'll see the information about, for instance, CEQA, that you'll need to provide some general information, and then a budget. You'll have a project name, you'll describe and fill out all the information that's relevant to your particular project as far as contracted services, materials, what kinds of rentals you might need. Do you need a chipper, for instance, or are you working with a contracted crew? But then, as you can see, we're doing the workshop tonight, but one thing I wanted to emphasize, the deadline is to submit your questions. I'll get to that in just a moment, but you will submit your application that you just showed you. And you'll send that to vegmanagement@sonoma-county.org. And I'll repeat that several times just so you know, but that's the gist of the application that you'll need to fill out. And so with that, I'll go back to my my PowerPoint so we can keep this progressing. And yeah, looks like it's the correct form. And so we each applicant, they should definitely review the grant guidelines, then completion, and shoot, I'm getting a strange query by Zoom. Robert, are you able to?
You're a little fuzzy on my end. You're on mute. All right.
All right, I'm back. Okay, sorry about that. A little technical difficulties. Let's keep going. Going back to the PowerPoint. Let's try this again. All right, so you need to complete your application, then provide a project map and a location map. Robert, just a screen check. Are you able to see the PowerPoint slide?
I'm still seeing the grant application process slide.
Okay, thanks. That's the one I wanted.
Okay.
And then finally, I wanted to you confirm your environmental compliance. And then finally, I want you to go through the project entry portal on the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So with that, I wanted to go advance to the next slide. And so before we go into the CWPP portal, I just want to describe the key deadlines here. So first of all, we want you to submit your deadline or submit your questions via email to the vegmanagement@sonoma-county.org address. Submit those by March 13th at 5 o'clock, and then we'll provide you a response to all applicants by 5 o'clock on March 15th. The applications are due on March 28th at 3 p.m. So please don't try to submit anything after 3 p.m. The portal will be closed at that time. Then the selection committee will be, the selection committee will be reviewing the proposals during April and then notify applicants whether they were successful or not. sometime during the first week of May. Then the grant agreements do need to be approved by the Board of Supervisors, and we have a targeted date of May 14th or May 21st to be able to get that approval by the board. Then we will enter into the grant agreements. So with that, I want to go into the project entry portal. So I'll stop sharing this screen and see if I can go to my other screen, which shows the portal itself. So let's all right. So when we look at the project portal, you see, Robert, real quick check on what's being shown.
We're not seeing anything right now.
Oh, right. I need to. All right. Let's see. All right. Here we go. Hang on. There we go. All right. So sharing the screen now, you should be able to see the CWPP project portal. Robert, yeah. All right, great. So in this case, you'll see this is the portal that was used to be able to enter your project into the CWPP, which is the Sonoma County Community Wildfire Prevention Plan. And this plan is really how the county hopes to track all the type of work that people are doing across the county. And so if you're going to be submitting an application, like I just described, to the Vegetation Management Grant Program, you'll first submit your application, and then you'll complete this survey with the CWPP project entry portal. You'll choose a long form, the long survey, which is required by the Vegetation Management Grant proposal. Then you'll complete each phase of the project, each one of the pages. There's only 6 menus, there are 6 pages to be able to fill this out. And most of them are queries. So you can enter your organization, the type of organization that you are. If it's a nonprofit or having a tax ID number, you will enter the organization number, your relevant data as far as the email and telephone. And then whether you're working with different organizations, like for instance, CAL FIRE, your local fire district, or the RCDs, for instance. Then click on the next queue after you've completed those other questions. And again, you'll be asked a number of different questions. And all these many of them have drop-down boxes that you complete. And it's a pretty easy survey to be able to complete. If it's defensible space, sometimes you'll have a query if it's, for instance, if it's wildlands fuels, and you say yes, or I'm sorry, let's try that again. If you say yes, you will have the types of fuels or treatments you're going to do, whether it's mechanical or hand crews or using prescribed burns. All those things need to be answered in order to advance to the next page. And so once you complete that, here is one thing I do want to point out is here's your project description on the second page of the survey, and it has a minimum or a maximum of 1,000 characters. You can take your application that you used, that project description you did in the application, and be able to cut and paste it right into your project entry portal application as well. So that way you're able to keep the information consistent and we get all the information that we need. So hopefully that is relatively clear. Sorry, I just thought about one other thing I wanted to share with you. On the project entry portal. So as we go into the third phase, for the fourth question, you need to complete a project map. And this is a very handy tool that is simply giving us a sense of where your project is located. Now, I've already done that for this particular project, but you're essentially going to do, by doing a series, clicking this box on the upper right, it says area. You can then draw your map of the area that you're going to be treating. And that gives you, that is registered into the CWPP, and we can be able to follow up on more specifics later in time. You can also create a zip file for like a PDF, or maybe you have a GIS capabilities. You can put a shape file into this Dropbox or drop a file here box in order to give us the precise data that we need for that particular category. And then finally, for this section, I wanted to highlight this key factor here. Does your project area include any public land, such as, are you sharing a border with regional parks and want to move the treatment into their land? Is it a state park? We want you to be very specific about that, and whether you've reached out to the landowner, such as regional parks, and advise them that you're submitting this project as something that you want to do jointly. That's something so that we try to avoid any miscommunications about a project that might be on public lands where the public landowner isn't familiar with your particular project. Okay, so that is all I have to say about the project entry tool. I'm wondering if we have any questions that have come up during that first discussion. Looks like it's pretty quiet out there. All right, so moving along, we will, let me see, let's go to our slideshow again. Let's see if we can pull this off quickly. Wow, this is a technically challenging day, but that's all right. We'll work with it. Okay, looks like you should be able to see it. And let's go to presentation mode. All right, Robert. Oh,
Yep.
all right, fantastic. And so, so here is that slide, and I just wanted you to highlight that once you get to this point, you can scroll down, and you'll be able to see the project entry tool button. Just click right there. And again, these are the types of information that's on the project entry tool survey. And again, kind of emphasizing how to enter in your long survey for the application. And that information will be forwarded to me as a project manager, but you also need to submit a full application that you can find on our website. So with that, I'd like to pass the baton over to Robert Aguero to go over the environmental compliance that's required in order to have a successful project and what some of the issues are there. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and Robert, take it away.
All right, thank you. I will just share my screen real quick. So we should be seeing that, and then I'll put it in presenter mode. Okay, so we see, Kim, are you seeing the regular slide? Great.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
All right, so good afternoon or evening, everyone. My name is Robert Aguero. I am a senior environmental specialist and registered professional forester here at Permit Sonoma. And my goal tonight is to go over, CEQA, what it is, environmental review, permitting, and how that applies to this grant program. So just a couple of disclaimers. I am not a lawyer, and this presentation does not constitute legal advice. Additionally, during the Q&A session, I won't be able to make any determinations about specific project CEQA analysis. We're here mainly just keeping things broad at this point. So just a quick outline. So we'll cover what is CEQA, when and to who does it apply, the different levels of CEQA analysis that are often required for these types of projects, how to comply with CEQA as you design your project and apply for this grant, and then other best practices. So starting off, what is CEQA? CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act. It was enacted in 1970. It was modeled after the federal equivalent, which is called NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. I put a couple of the, legal descriptions where it is located in state code. And so really what CEQA is it requires state and local government agencies in California to inform decision makers and the public about the potential environmental impacts of proposed projects and to reduce those environmental impacts to the extent feasible. So right here at the very bottom of the slide, I put in a link which will take you to a PDF of CEQA, like all the rules and regulations. You could just Google, 2024 CEQA handbook PDF, and it'll probably take you, that'll be the first link that probably pops up. So CEQA applies to public agencies, state agencies, counties, cities, state universities, special districts, RCDs, cemetery districts, irrigation districts. It does not apply to federal agencies, other state entities, corporations, private groups, private landowners are not required to comply with CEQA. Rather, we as the government, because we are potentially funding a project for like a private project, we are the ones who are required to comply with CEQA, but we will often ask information to help us do our CEQA analysis from those who we are funding the work for. So like I just said, CEQA applies to projects, meaning the whole of an action that could cause direct physical change in the environment or a reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change. And I just want to highlight the second of the smaller, caveats here, which is an activity undertaken by a person which is supported in whole or in part through public agency contracts, grants, subsidies, loans, or other forms of assistance. So that is why we have to do CEQA and ask certain things of, grant applicants to demonstrate CEQA compliance for this grant program, because state law requires that we are required to do a CEQA analysis of projects that we are funding through grant programs. So to show that a project that a lead agency is funding is compliant with CEQA and is either avoiding or mitigating impacts to the environment, a CEQA document must be prepared. So the primary types of CEQA documents are notices of exemptions, negative declarations, and EIRs. So with notices of exemptions, this is the majority of projects that would probably apply to this program. There are what are called categorical exemptions and statutory exemptions. Categorical exemptions are broad categories of exemptions that are defined in the CEQA guidelines. And then statutory exemptions are projects that are exempt as defined in state legislature, like emergencies, ministerial projects, things like that. Negative declarations and then mitigated negative declarations are required when a discretionary project that is not exempt, so it doesn't fit into either a categorical or a statutory exemption, has no adverse effects, or if those effects can be mitigated or reduced to a level that is less than significant. And then EIRs are required if there are impacts from the project that can't be reduced to a less than significant level. And a very common example of an EIR that's used for vegetation management a lot is what's called the CalVTP, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So yeah, just again highlighting the categorical exemptions and the CalVTP program EIR are really the two levels of CEQA analysis that are that we use for this grant program. So highlighting categorical exemptions, like I said, these are categories or classes of projects that are determined to not have significant impacts to the environment. So these are projects that are typically considered exempt based on their geographic location and scope or size. So a very common example is what's called the minor alterations to land exemption that includes some language about defensible space. So if there's a government funded or approved project for defensible space work, it's typically considered exempt. There's some restrictions on that. You can't impact special status wildlife or plant species. There's certain restrictions on tree removal. You can't, cause erosion or sedimentation into water. And so if your project meets, that categorical description, it would typically be considered exempt. So it's just highlighting some other exemptions that get used for vegetation management. The one I just mentioned is what's called the Class 4 exemption, minor alterations to land. But there's a couple other ones like existing facilities. So that's typically what's called the maintenance exemption. We've seen that used for, you know, roadside vegetation management where there's a history of maintenance along the road. You're maintaining, you're not expanding, you're not doing anything new or anything that hasn't been done before. Um, there's some other ones like these Class 7 and Class 8 exemptions for actions by regulatory agencies for natural resource protection or protection of the environment. And then the Class 33 exemption, which is for small habitat restoration projects. And some of the caveats for that one is it can't be more than 5 acres. It doesn't it doesn't use any mechanized equipment. Most of the work's done by hand and has to demonstrate that it's really a restoration project and not some level of development that's occurring. So highlighting that Class 4 exemption again, that's used a lot. Again, so it says here, fuel management activities within 30 feet of structures to reduce the volume of flammable vegetation, provided that the activities will not result in the taking of endangered, rare, threatened plant or animal species or significant erosion and sedimentation of surface waters. And then this exemption shall apply to fuel management activities within 100 feet of a structure if the public agency having fire protection responsibility for the area has determined that 100 feet of fuel clearance is required. And so the way that's worked in practice is we've seen grant applicants in the past, say their project meets this definition, and they'll give us some evidence that proves that, they've done some due diligence in showing that there's no erosion or sedimentation, right? They're not working near water, they're avoiding water. They have some language in there or provisions or have accounted for in their budget, potential biological surveys, things like that. And then if they want to go past 30 feet of structures, they'll generally supply a letter from, the local fire agency that says, yeah, this is, this extra 70 feet is necessary for vegetation management. So talking about the Cal VTP, this is what's called a program, EIR, that was adopted by the Board of Forestry several years ago, and it allows other government agencies known as project proponents to use this CEQA analysis for CEQA compliance. So projects that use the Cal VTP must occur, or most of the project must occur in the state responsibility area. And use the defined treatments, project requirements, and mitigation measures that are defined in that program EIR. It covers most project types that one would want to use for vegetation management and does allow for CEQA coverage for future treatments as well, which is a major benefit. I also believe there may be grant funds available for projects that are, embarking on a planning endeavor to do a Cal VTP, do that level of analysis. So if that's that I think that there's some planning funds available, unless Kim says otherwise. Just a few other things regarding permits. I just wanted to highlight sort of like 3 major ones. So if you're proposing work in the county right-of-way, basically along a county road, you may need an encroachment permit. So I would recommend reaching out early to Permit Sonoma-engineering at sonoma-county.org, or you could just Google Sonoma County encroachment permit. And so that will likely require some level of traffic control, just sort of like broad level detail to get that permit. If you're working in riparian forests, so by streams, you may want to contact the county because you may need a riparian corridor permit. So the easiest way to figure that out is if the parcel that you're working on is zoned RC, if it has those 2 letters in its zoning key. You can contact Permit Sonoma-Natural Resources at sonoma-county.org for more information about that. And then if you Google fire fuel reduction in the riparian corridor for Sonoma County, we have some guidance documents about how to help you achieve compliance with that piece of code. You also may need to contact the Department of Fish and Wildlife if you need what's called a lake and streambed alteration agreement if you're working, in or around streams in particular. And then if you're working in the coastal zone, there's a chance a coastal development permit may be required. So if your parcel zoning includes the letter CC, that means coastal zone. And we have some information on our website about what is needed for those types of permits as well. Just a few other things for project design and applicants. So incorporate planning items like any biological surveys, archaeological surveys, bird nesting surveys, etc., into your project budget and timeline. Sometimes there's seasonal restrictions and long-term survey requirements that could impact your timing, and it helps us know, that you've done your due diligence to research and figure out, what the potential impacts are of your project, and it helps inform your project design as well. And maybe there's areas that you need to avoid instead of working in because there could be sensitive resources there. Just a few other best practices. Read the CEQA guidelines. Really, it's a pretty easy Google search and really readable, I think. If you just sort of like Google, the different types of categorical exemptions to figure out what the language is to help shape your project. And then you can use that language to help describe your project in a more detailed narrative. Um, you know, there's like Kim mentioned for the CWPP entry portal tool, there will be a map, helps us know where your project is, including the footprint. Again, consider seasonal issues. If you need additional permits, we recommend getting those first, or at least starting the process of getting those before you start your work. And then it's always recommended to consult with a qualified professional if you can, like a forester, a planning consultant, a biologist, etc. And then I just wanted to highlight, how to fill out this particular section if you don't know what your CEQA process is. So if you think your project is exempt and you're wanting the County of Sonoma to be the lead agency, which most people are, then you will check not started for item A. And then in the estimated completion date, you would say TBD upon county approval and review of the project. And then you'd also click exemption and then put in whichever exemption or exemptions you think best fit your project on how you designed it. And so that is my presentation. I'll be around to answer questions in the chat and during the Q&A time. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Robert. I'm glad you were able to clarify that in the case of an exemption, that the county will help you to process that. And that's where if you were given a grant, you would work directly with me and Robert to figure out how the exemption would read, making sure that you are aware of whatever bird surveys that might be necessary, depending on the time of the year that you want to implement that particular fuel treatment. So I really appreciate your comments on that. Robert, how long does it usually take for you to complete a CEQA notice of exemption for a project that's trying to do, say, a roadside treatment of any particular size?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty quick, quick is relative turnaround time. I would say within a month or two. I think if we're able to get the information that we need, if your project description is clear, if you have a map, if you know where you're working, if you've done some planning ahead of time, it usually helps us on our end to help process those exemptions much quicker. So I would generally say a month to 2 months if your project is selected and you need us to process an exemption for you.
That sounds great. Thanks very much, Robert. I think when we think about those notice of exemptions, it's really highlights some of the key best practices that you're going to apply when you do your fuel treatment. If it's a shaded fuel break or a roadside treatment, for instance, that's one of the more common defensible space projects. All those should fall under an exemption, but it's really a process of that's essentially what Robert does. Right when we get all the applications, he screens through them just to kind of say whether there's going to be an exemption or not. But again, one of the things that he emphasized was the need to check in with professionals that might have a better awareness of what the CEQA exemptions are. You can describe what your project, what your intention is of the fuel treatment, and then we can give you that type of follow-up through those different professionals. So foresters or folks who are working on the ground on these types of treatments will be aware. Okay. I did want to give a shout out to the public infrastructure department from the county. And actually, maybe I'll save that to a slide further down the road to be able to explain a little bit more about that. In the meantime, I'd like to bring back Ben Nicholls to be able to share with you some of our regional priorities. And I do have a couple of slides or a slide for you, Ben, to be able to kind of guide you through that. Are you seeing? Yes, it should be the right slide. And It's all you, Ben. Thank you for your time.
You bet. Thank you for having me, Kim. And for the group that's listening tonight, it's been an honor to be a part of this team bringing resources back into the county to help prepare not only for future wildfires, but to create a more resilient environment here in Sonoma County. Obviously, this is the money that the supervisors set aside after we experienced a handful of fires, and this is related to obviously the fires that we had. So these monies were set aside specifically by the supervisors to create generational change, something that's making the landscape different. We have taken the fire off of the landscape, a regular return of fire off of the landscape for over 100 years. And so we've had an accumulation of forest fuels that during our catastrophic fires, under those critical fire weather conditions that we experience from time to time, creates an environment that firefighters are reacting to and defending homes and people's lives in the communities that you live in. And so the idea for the approach coming into this is that we want to be able to bring resources to the county so that we can fight that fire before it enters your neighborhood, before it enters your camp. We don't want to fight fire in populated areas. We want to get that fire checked up outside of those built environments prior to it getting into homes. Because once we're fighting fire in amongst homes, we're not able to contain the fire as we would be if we didn't have the threat of life and property in the way. So the priorities for myself, for the agency, and for the group is something that creates that helps reset the natural environment back to a place in time before there was this accumulation of fuel. And so whether or not that shaded fuel breaks along ridge lines so that we can check that fire up before it enters into a community, whether or not it's broadcast burning that helps reduce the vegetation available for a wildfire event to act basically as what we call a calming zone as that fire transitions from a non-treated area into a reduced fuel area. That fire intensity, activity, and rate of spread slows down and gives firefighters a chance to catch it there before, again, it's into that built environment. We also want to see, while the supervisors set aside a significant amount of money to help with this process, the project in front of us is not a one and done endeavor. It took us over 100 years to get here, and I guarantee you it's not going to be overnight that we get out of the situation that we're in. So Kim and the team, Robert and I are trying to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck that we can as we work through these projects, because as you're aware, in 2024, there's $1 million available for grantees. Here in Sonoma County, we have a little over 740,000 acres of what we call state responsibility area, which is outside of the cities and basically the valley floor of the Santa Rosa Plain there. $1 million divided, or 744,000 acres divided by $1 million doesn't take long to do the math that we can't treat everything. So we have to make sure that the projects that are awarded are making sure to maximize the resources they've been given to bring that project forward. So we look forward to working with groups bringing grant proposals forward. I'm always available. I'll make sure I share my email here at the end of the Zoom meeting so that you have that for your further information. But Kim and Robert and I are here for you, because if you win, we win. We need the resources here in the county to be able to effectively fight those fires that we will experience in the future and have a resilient and healthy county for future generations. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ben. Let me put up my video again. So yeah, Ben, maybe I can ask you a few questions about when we talk about match, what are some of the ways that people can match their proposal with other sources of funding or labor source? What have you seen in the past in other types of proposals?
So you're spot on, Kim. The match component is a labor component or financial. We've seen communities like Fort Ross and the coastal ridges match people time. So the community rallies together on community work days, and they're out doing the work that they're asking us to help fund. There's other entities that are contributing financial resources from their organizations. But to Kim's point, we want to make sure that not only is there a sharing of the lift on the initial project, but also a maintenance component downstream. Vegetation management is like a haircut, right? Vegetation grows back. It is not a one and done scenario. And so there needs to be the community or a neighborhood commitment and involvement to the project, both to initially complete it and then to make sure that it has longevity and it has meaning downstream. Because without any follow-on work, in roughly 5 years period of time, the fuel conditions are back to a situation that is not productive anymore as far as the threat from wildfire and a healthy and resilient ecosystem.
That's a great response. I really appreciate that. And I think that kind of emphasizes the value of the community wildfire prevention plan, where the Permit Sonoma has been able to create this tool where people can enter their project. And what we did with the Vegetation Management Grant Program is make it a dual process. You submit an application to us, but you're also completing and entering your project into the portal so that we can track these projects, whether they get funding or not. We can still be able to track these over time. And one of the things that I wanted to emphasize during that fourth bullet on our screen right now, longevity and leverage potential. When I think about the type of projects we've been able to fund so far, we always look at that opportunity to add value to things we've already invested in. So look at the Coast Ridge Forest Council or the Mark West Collaborative. Those projects are adding value by attracting new sources of funding, as well as being able to get the proper technical assistance to make these things more successful in the future. So thank you very much, Ben. I really appreciate those comments.
My pleasure.
All right, so moving on, I thought it would be valuable to share a few things that we've seen over time, such as that from the different proposals that have been successful. And so thinking from back in 2021, it was a pretty, I always call it the shotgun effect, where we used funding across a large landscape to be able to try to provide more assistance to groups that were in need of help and had been able to demonstrate their need via the application. But some of the things that we saw as successful is those projects that had a contractual arrangement where they used local service providers. So there was kind of skin in the game. The local providers wanted to see success because they probably lived in the neighborhood and wanted to be able to make sure that their homes were safe just as much as the rest of the community. Environmentally compliant projects, as Robert had shared with us, really do rely on various sources of technical assistance. It could be through the resource conservation districts, professional foresters, fire professionals. Those people can help you guide your projects through the environmental compliance project. So those that have done so were usually successful in getting grants. Experience managing grants and having that fiscal and narrative reporting ability, that's a key factor in our selection process. Landowner engagement and community outreach, that's absolutely essential. We want people to be able to say, yeah, my neighbors are working together to try to create this type of fuel treatment. So it's not just on one property. We can't provide a grant to individual landowners, just for the record, but we can look at communities that are working together and trying to maximize their efforts. So, and then finally, I wanted to mention the public infrastructure. You should reach out to them. If you're trying to do a roadside treatment in a number of different miles, engage the public infrastructure department early so they know what you're trying to do and they can provide technical support, including traffic control, or maybe they have a chipper program that can help you to support the type of work you're doing. So reach out to them. Once you have a solid application, try to get some sense of some feedback of what they think are priorities from their standpoint. So I appreciate that. And then Robert already addressed the issue of environmental compliance for large scale projects. That probably requires a vegetation treatment program. And so that's a little bit longer endeavor. We have been able to fund a few VTP projects. And so we can always look at that in the future as well. And then finally, I just wanted to kind of close out on the types of projects that we're trying to get people to apply for: access and egress, defensible space, and community risk reduction. All these are better defined in the guidelines that you could visit on our website. Wildland fuel treatments, trying to think about those larger landscapes and those ridge tops that Ben and Robert had described on trying to prevent fire from coming into communities. Community education, has been funded in the past. Environmental compliance, that is like the VTP that Robert mentioned and I mentioned earlier. So, and then finally, some of the other criteria that that have been used in our selection process are projects that seek multiple benefits, not just trying to do one shaded fuel break or one prescribed burn and then you're done, but trying to look at multiple benefits. How is this improving the overall forest health? How does this improve access for firefighters? How are you going to maintain it? What's the organizational capacity of your organization? Are there communities of low income populations that should be protected and have equal amount of rights and equity in these types of programs? Ecosystem health, I mentioned that earlier. And then advancing local workforce development and training. So maybe you're working with a circuit rider or the California or North Bay. These groups can all help provide labor sources, but also recognize that some of them might not have all the skills to work on really steep slopes or heavy fuel. So be aware of those types of conditions. Talk to those folks and figure out whether that's a good option for your project or whether you should look at more professional services that do this for a living. And involving multiple landowners, that's always a positive thing. And then anything that incorporates education and outreach in your project has always been something that's positive. So if you're completely confused on all the things we've shared with you tonight, you're not alone. There's a lot of people who are just trying to get an idea of what steps they should take and being able to create an opportunity to create a larger scale project. But if you're new at this game, we don't expect you to know what CEQA is or what types of fuel treatments might be appropriate for you. So what we're trying to offer for folks who are just starting to learn more about this from the get-go are these different local workshops that are being offered throughout the West County right now. We hope to migrate into northern Sonoma County as well as along the Myakaba corridor to be able to provide greater technical assistance so people are aware of these different types of tools via the workshops that are going to be offered in various areas. I'll provide you with our contact information on my last slide, and you can always send me an email to find out more about what workshops might be happening in your area. With that, I'm going to go ahead and go to my last slide, but I'm wondering if there's some questions that we can answer right quick. So Ben has provided I'll go ahead and send this to everyone. This is his contact information. And there we go. So there's Ben's information in the chat. We have a question. And the question is, did I hear correctly? The nonprofits are exempt from any CEQA reports. That is incorrect. Nonprofits are required to submit CEQA documentation if they are using public funding to do a project. The one exception would be if it's under an exemption, then the county will help you prepare that exemption in order to comply with CEQA requirements. So, Robert, do you want to respond to that any further?
Sure. Yeah, I can expand on that. So I guess it is true that, if a nonprofit is doing the work themselves through their own funding, they don't have to comply with CEQA. But if in the case of this particular grant program, if the county was to fund the work that a nonprofit is doing, that work then triggers the requirement for CEQA because there's government funds available. And so then we, as the funding agency and the CEQA agency, would ask certain things of, whoever we're funding to make sure that we can meet our CEQA obligations, which would mean making sure the project can fit into, the constraints or the requirements of a categorical exemption, for example.
Great. Thank you very much, Robert. I appreciate that. Great. Well, we've cruised through the material pretty well. If people have any additional questions, feel free to put it in your Q&A box. If not, I don't know if Robert or Ben, do you have anything else you'd like to share tonight?
Just reiterating that, it's very important to me to support those folks that are trying to bring resources into the county. So if you win, we win. So that's why I gave my information. My folks are always available. There's also some great resources on Fire Safe Sonoma as far as the other different contacts that you can reach out to help develop these projects. One of the things that we consistently see is that people wait until the grant has been announced to try to build their project. And that is just not a recipe for success. So even if you're not successful this go around, or even if you have a packaged proposal for this go around, my ask and suggestion is that you work with folks like Kim, myself, Fire Safe Sonoma to develop projects for your community to help protect you from future fires. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate those comments. It's been a pleasure tonight, folks. I really appreciate your attention. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Either my direct email, which is kim.batchelder@sonoma-county.org, or vegmanagement@sonoma-county.org. Either way, I will be able to address those questions. I will not be able to provide any guidance as far as whether this will be fundable or those types of questions. But logistically, if there's things that you're struggling with to get the information in the application or into the project entry portal, we're happy to help you with that as well. So one last comment is that this recording will be posted on our website, as will the other two sessions that we'll have. Each session will be essentially a repeat of this information. So if you endured our comments during this session, you will have received the same amount of information that other workshops will offer. But we encourage you to take a peek if you need to get refreshed on any information that we covered tonight. So with that, thank you very much for your attention, folks, and we'll bid you good night. Thank you.